Every year, Save the Children responds to an average of over 100 emergencies around the world. Our humanitarian work currently makes up approximately half of the total programmatic spend globally. These emergencies can be rapid onset, like earthquakes and floods, or slow onset, like droughts and protracted crises. Some emergencies can be a complex mix of slow and rapid onset, such as conflict and displacement. Protracted crises can also experience spikes or shocks, for example, extreme cold or disease outbreak in conflict. To respond quickly, appropriately and effectively, it is vital that we are prepared. So how do we ensure a high level of preparedness? Save the Children requires all country officers to have an emergency preparedness plan. The emergency preparedness process starts with an annual workshop, which is designed to guide participants through the development of their own plan in a way that maximizes ownership and buy-in.
What I have learned from this training and this EPP workshop is how to be prepared for different types of emergencies, not only the conflict, and to know what are the specific roles and responsibilities of the team. It was really good to go through the EPP plans from previous years to see what went well and what didn't work and how we can change things in the future to do better jobs.
The first task is to complete a risk analysis. This identifies both what hazards are we likely to be responding to and how children and their families are likely to be affected. From this, staff can agree what early interventions the country office should plan to mount quickly and effectively following the onset of a new emergency. The process then requires country officers to design an appropriate system of risk monitoring, which will allow us to monitor any change in the level of risk. This gives us valuable time to prepare for and plan our response. In slower moving or evolving crises, an early warning can give us time to implement early actions that can mitigate the impact of a predicted crisis before it occurs. The plan also lists out minimum preparedness actions. These are practical actions to position a country office with a basic level of organisational readiness to respond to a new emergency. As well as being a useful checklist for country officers, they also provide regional officers and the wider organisation with valuable information for monitoring developments and supporting country officers. It is critical that there is a plan developed to complete these, so that all teams and functions within a country office know their roles and are equipped to support humanitarian response when required. For countries that identify a high risk of a hazard occurring, or where risk monitoring indicates an increasing risk, advanced preparedness is required. The primary focus of this is a contingency plan that is specific to the identified risk. So, what is required for a successful preparedness process?
There are a number of key elements to the preparedness process. Firstly, emergency preparedness must be a core business activity. This means that it is annually budgeted for, that it informs the country strategic plan, and that there is meaningful SMT buy-in to the process so that ultimately a coherent, realistic and therefore effective EPP is in place. Secondly, the people involved in response must be involved in the preparedness process. If we don't have the right people available to ensure that we have the right plan in place, it's much less likely to be effective. So SMT and other key humanitarian staff, and depending on the context, it can also be extremely valuable to include appropriate partners too.
Let's take a look at some examples from around the world. How has a good preparedness process benefited our teams and their responses?
Since the EPP process, we've had 2 emergency responses, and what I'm seeing is a much better clarity of purpose in the response. Our teams work in departments, and we're a large country office. Our departments work in much more as a unit to respond, and people understanding better their roles and responsibilities in responding.
EPP is a joint effort of Save the Children's entire team. We have awards, we have human resources, we have logistics, and we have all our technical thematic team who have been involved in the EPP preparedness.
Also, something really is very important I want to emphasize is the partners for the first time. The partners is with us from the very beginning and the design phase of the EPP. So we are together with the partners are designing all of the preparedness and needed measures to be able to be prepared and respond to any emergency.
The process of creating the emergency preparedness plan is as important as the plan itself. People become part of the process, thus understanding the plan and its significance.
The biggest takeaway lesson from the devastating 2011 famine in Somalia was the need to act decisively on information from early warning system and not to wait for formal declaration of famine before scaling up our response. When the drought was forecast, Save the Children sounded the alarm, and sharing information, sharing early warning information and assessment data from the field teams. And we also looked how could we or what could we do differently in our existing response.
We have over 100 staff who are currently trained on emergency response team who could be deployed anytime, anywhere if there's a mega emergency. In addition to that, we also have pre-positioned kits that we can reach at least 50,000 people in very short period of time.
Emergency preparedness planning is as important for domestic responses as it is for international responses. At Save the Children US, we invested last year in developing a new emergency preparedness plan. We had training sessions, role plays, and we ended the year with a strong document as our emergency preparedness plan. It's a good thing we did because this year we've been hit by 3 massive hurricanes and have had to mount emergency responses in Texas, and in Florida, and now in Puerto Rico. Because of our emergency preparedness plan, staff knew exactly what to do, what their roles were, and how to work together. And as a result, we're running 3 effective responses.
Well thought through preparedness can also enable early action. This has been shown to reduce the cost of responding to an eventual emergency and can help build resilience before a crisis occurs. Not only are we doing the right thing for children, but by being on the ground early, we are able to leverage more donor funding for our responses. It is vital that all country officers take action, not only to undertake a preparedness workshop, but also to commit to minimum preparedness actions to ensure that we're ready to respond whenever a disaster strikes, and ultimately to save children's lives.